obviously, internationally, and because we are living in a state of, limbo at the moment, at least for the next 2 weeks before we've got a new government, much of New Zealand's international and even certainly media commentary has been around what's been happening in the Middle East. Without question, there have been some developments overnight. There will be a lot more developments, I would imagine, almost every day for a long while yet. Joining us to talk about that is Dr. David Cumin, a senior lecturer at Auckland University, on what is happening in the Middle East and what are the next steps, and he joins us now. David, thank you for joining the show. Love to have you on.
Thanks for having me. I should clarify that I'm not speaking in my university capacity. I'm the co-director of the Israel Institute of New Zealand. Separately to that, I don't want to muddle the two up.
Fair enough. Actually, yeah. I guess your doctorate, I think, you're actually on the pharmacology side of things, aren't you?
I'd love to talk about that at a different time. There's lots of interesting and wonderful research done by superb people and colleagues of mine, but that's for another time.
Yes, yes, I will. But I just wanted to say beehives. So that's what we should talk about, isn't it? Is that right?
Yeah, there's a few very cool things that we're doing with bees and beehives.
No, we will talk about that later on. But yeah, it is fascinating what you're doing, I have to say.
Yeah, thank you. You've done your homework. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Oh, actually, I read one of the papers. That's how much homework I've done. And there's a reason for that, is that my niece did a PhD. I think it's at Stanford, in looking at bee behaviour as a way of drawing associations with human behaviour. She said she's quite a fan of bees, I have to say.
Oh, they're incredible. There's so much to learn and so much to understand, and I'd love to read her thesis and understand more about her work. It sounds very interesting.
All right. Moving on though, what is the institute though that you are representing, and what exactly do you do?
So we've been around since about 2016-17, and we say that we're an independent think tank dedicated to providing a better understanding of Israel to New Zealanders. Really, it just means we've got a website and people have joined us as members, and we provide updates and give commentary and spread information. You're
Jewish then, and it is of a Jewish background, yeah?
I am. The co-directors of the Institute are not, so we're not a Jewish organisation per se, but we established very soon after the 2014 war with Hamas, because we saw that there was a need for a group in New Zealand that was able to counter some of the mis and disinformation at that time, which were called lies, and to provide a better understanding of Israel, what Israel faces, and the amazing technology and wonderful people and culture and history of the land as well. So that's when we started, and unfortunately, the need, I think, for organisations like us has only grown, and it's a real shame, because I got into it and gave up time to dedicate to it with the hope that I would work ourselves out of a job and we wouldn't be needed.
Right. Well, that's not the case at the moment, I wouldn't have thought.
No.
So you are, in a funny sort of way, you're the opposite of the Palestinian cause activists who are part of New Zealand academia and of wider society as well, yeah?
I guess that's one way of looking at it. I mean,
the John Mintos of this world, for example.
Yeah, well, yes, I think that's a way of describing it.
All right. Now, overnight, obviously, and I made the comment this morning when I came on air that I thought that Hamas had conducted probably one of the most successful terrorist organisations for a long time, in the sense of terrorism is all about provoking the object of your terrorism into an overreaction. Do you think that is a potential, the overreaction? Because I have to say, at the moment, the Arab world is aflame. Yeah.
Yes, there's a lot of inflammatory rhetoric going around, and partly because of the misreporting of what happened overnight in Gaza. There was a synagogue burnt down in Tunisia, so there are certainly flames on the streets. I think there's a couple of important points to make on your question. The first is that, yes, it was Hamas that slaughtered the Jews and murdered babies and kidnapped families, but we can't forget that they are funded and directed by Iran. And this is not just a localized issue in a small part of the Middle East. This is a much bigger issue of Iranian ambition and Islamist terror. And I think if you want to call it success, that's a awful euphemism. I don't think it's as much because of the response, which we can talk about levels of proportionality, but the fact that the IDF has warned civilians to get out of the way, has not sent in ground troops immediately, and has targeted infrastructure, has called off strikes when there are civilians in the way, has done everything to protect the civilians in Gaza, which Hamas does not do. The success of the terrorist attack was not in the response, but was in the slaughter of the worst number of Jews since the Holocaust. And that is amplified by the bragging and disgusting broadcasts of the atrocities that they committed, to the point where they took the phones of kidnapped Israelis and messaged their family members scenes of their loved ones being executed. The ISIS-level attacks were, if you want to call it, the success of the terror. The response needs to be had, because no country should be asked to live with that level of brutal terror activity and infrastructure on its border.
I understand that, and I can understand the anger and the outrage, and obviously I think that there's enormous sympathy from most of the world as to the plight that Israelis suffered and the massacre of innocents that occurred. But, and here's the but bit, they've gone back into the Gaza Strip. They're surrounded by largely innocent individuals, obviously children, and non-combatants, who also find themselves caught up in this conflict from the Israeli response and are dying also.
No, Mike, they don't. They find themselves caught up in this because of Hamas. It's not because of the Israeli response.
Well,
Hamas uses them as human shields. They've blocked civilians moving out of areas controlled by terrorists in order that Israel doesn't bomb, because they know that the IDF is a moral army, and Hamas is oppressing the civilians in Gaza, and it is Hamas's responsibility. It's not because of anything that Israel has done.
Well, I'm sorry, but they are Israeli armaments that are causing the death of Palestinian civilians in the Gaza, yeah?
The Israeli armaments are fired at terrorist infrastructure. The fact that Hamas puts its civilians in harm's way, doesn't allow them to move, and holds them as human shields, means that the deaths are Hamas's responsibility, ultimately Iran's responsibility. It is awful what is happening. I don't mean to diminish it in the slightest. It's truly awful. And for the last 17 or 18 years, the civilians in Gaza have been oppressed by an Islamist terrorist organization that killed hundreds of its political opponents to seize power and rule the Gaza Strip. Israel, in the past few months, has increased the number of border crossings allowed for Gazans to come and work in Israel, has always provided electricity and water that it didn't have to, has allowed humanitarian aid to come through, which, by the way, Egypt has not. Egypt let through far fewer people across its border with Gaza. And we have to also remember that in 2005, the IDF went in and forcibly tore Jewish Israelis from their homes and moved them forcibly across the border in order that there might be the building up of a sovereign Palestinian state that could live in peace with Israel and become what was hoped to be the Singapore of the Mediterranean. Unfortunately, a terror group funded by Iran with ISIS-like ambitions has taken over and has been oppressing the people there ever since in trying to murder as many Jews as they can. The sad reality is that they managed to get through the security precautions that were put up when it was clear that there wasn't going to be peace.